following is a CUNY TV special presentation.
This is an exciting morning for ABNY, a first-time speaker, a newbie speaking in front of the ABNY group. We're honored to have my good friend Scott Rechler, Chairman and CEO of RXR Realty and Vice Chairman of the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. Scott has been with RXR since its formation back in 2007. And has led the firm to becoming one of New York's tri-state area's leading real estate companies, accumulating a portfolio over $5 billion of up to 100 properties, encompassing over 18 million square feet, and still growing. He just closed on a big deal the other day, both in Midtown and downtown, and very exciting to see their commitment to New York. But he's really here today to talk about his role as the Vice Chairman of the Port Authority. Scott also serves as the Chairman of the Port Authority's Capital Planning Committee, where he oversees the Port's $30 billion capital budget, including the redevelopment of the World Trade Center. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Scott Rechler.
I'm going to talk about the Port, but really I'm going to talk a little bit more regionally, not just about the Port. I'm going to talk more about the economics and the opportunities and some of the challenges that we face throughout the region. We've made it a point as we've grown our businesses to focus on what are the emerging trends, what are the new technologies, and how that's going to affect what's going forward. Back from my grandfather on, it's been understanding what's happening in the New York tri-state marketplaces and really feeling like we have a pulse of the new trends, the new dynamics, and living and breathing these markets day in and day out. So when Governor Cuomo in 2011 came to me and asked if I would join the Port Authority board, I thought, what a natural, it's regional, of course I'll join this board. It's been quite an experience. Here I am actually climbing a crane to the tallest point in the Western Hemisphere where we're putting the spire on the top of One World Trade Center. I don't know what I was thinking when I was doing that, but Matt Lauer did it. I thought if he could do it, I could do it. And then when I joined the Port Authority, a lot of people had warned me that it can get a little bit rough and tumble between the New York and New Jersey side of that place. And I thought, okay, I can handle that. I understand both those markets. I operate in those markets. I understand that my brother lives in New Jersey. I didn't realize I was going to be living days like I was in a combination of Boardwalk Empire and House of Cards. Really given me a broader perspective of understanding how integrated our region's economy is and how important infrastructure is to the economic engine of this region. Let me start with a more macro perspective. We talk about the United States and sort of how we fall into where we fall into the U.S. economy. And as I think about where we are in the U.S. economy right now, I would characterize it of a decade of drift. We're really going through a period of structural change as we shift to this more technologically advanced, globally integrated, idea-based economy. And with that, things change. Like in terms of productivity, people can do more with less. There's emphasis on new skills, which requires training, which takes time to get the right employees in the right spots to grow. We're now having to learn how to compete in a global marketplace with new people you're selling to, new patterns, new ways to collaborate. And there's new business models that are disrupting old business models. Now, ultimately, this should result in a higher standard of living for everyone. And it's going to actually create more sustainable growth long term. You see a lot of disparity. You see companies are throwing off high profits, yet we just can't get wage growth for the normal worker. Our unemployment rate are at all-time lows, but then when you look at our employment participation rate, it's at historically low levels too, because people get frustrated and they're leaving the labor force in totality. And so people from all walks of life are feeling the pain of this transition. Same thing with the real estate business. It's interesting. You watch Amazon, right? Now people shop online as well as in their stores. And so retailers have to think about hitting them with that online and brick and mortar type experience, what they call this omni-channel approach. Or Airbnb, and that's a little bit controversial to people, but it's changing the nature of the marketplace. Thousands of hotel rooms are being added to the marketplace without any buildings being built overnight. And so what's that change to the supply and demand capacity of the marketplace? People are collaborating, putting in much more density in their space. They want new amenities than they had before. They want game rooms. They want, in some of our buildings, we have even, doggy daycare that we're talking about. You're talking about, the bicycle repair shops. These are different types of demands from the millennials that are changing the way that people office today. That's, again, as you can see, changing the New York environment. And same with the way people live, right? People want to live in more urban-type settings where they can live, work, and play, and they're near public transportation. So, as we go through this and we think about the 21st century, there's going to be winners and losers. And the challenges are going to be felt more by people, by companies, by regions that don't or can't adapt to this new reality. Michael Bloomberg said it well when he said, "I've always believed that talent attracts capital more effectively and consistently than capital attracts talent." And the numbers don't lie. If you look what's happening here, our population growth is at record high. Our job growth is at record high in New York City today. Same thing with tourism. Again, record high. We've had a 123% increase in foreign visitorship since 2002, and our airports are having record usage. Every year it's breaking a new record. It's been the same thing with capital. New York's been a magnet for capital from around the world, that people are looking for a safe place to put their capital in a place right now where there's so much geopolitical and economic turmoil. And so we've seen more and more capital come to the New York marketplace. So when you have this much talent, it attracts companies. It attracts the fastest and best growing companies who want to go after that talent. And look at some of the names of the companies that have located themselves in New York. And this becomes a self-reinforcing cycle. The more talent that comes, the more companies that come. The more companies that come, the more talent wants to come. And this builds continuous momentum. And that's why I think when you look at the New York economy today, it's doing so well, is because this virtuous cycle that we're experiencing has tremendous momentum as we go forward. A recent study by The Economist came out, and it actually said that as of looking at all the global cities, New York is the best positioned city for the 21st century economy. And if you look at this list, better than London, Singapore, Hong Kong. But what was more interesting to me was when they looked at this, they actually said that New York is best situated and will be best situated through 2025. Now, this isn't by accident, right? This is a beneficiary of decades of investing in the quality of life of New York. Going back to the 90s, when we focused on bringing crime rates down, so New York was safe. So when people were thinking about sending their children to New York or moving companies to New York, they didn't have to worry about crime in neighborhoods. Or in the 2000s, where we invested in infrastructure and opening up new neighborhoods. Here's the challenge, though. What we need to be cautious of is New York becoming a victim of its own success. If you look at New York, its increased population is overwhelming the capacity of our infrastructure. It's overwhelming the capacity of our infrastructure, and as the city of affordable housing and affordable places to work. And we need to address that. And we don't have a demand problem. We see the demand coming in. We have a supply problem. And unless we come up with creative solutions to address the supply and the capacity, we're not going to have that demand going forward. And subway ridership, if you look at it right now, it's at a 65-year high, and it's forecasted to go up another 50%. The cost to live in New York has skyrocketed. Rental rates keep climbing day in and day out. We've seen a shift of product going to more luxury type product versus a more affordable type product, and so you don't have as many alternatives. As a matter of fact, last week, a piece of land in Hudson Yards by the High Line traded the land for $1,000 a square foot for just vacant land. And so now they have to build a building on it. So it shows you that this is something that is overwhelming and becoming harder and harder to find affordable housing in New York. If you look at office space today, I believe we are going to find ourselves of having a scarcity of 21st century quality office space. We have the same amount of office space today in New York as we had 20 years ago. The average age of our office space is over 80 years old today. And one of the dynamics that's driving this thing is that you see the conversion of prime office space, like the Sony building in this picture here, being converted to hotel and residential because of the values they're able to get. The same thing happened with the Bank of New York building downtown. That's being converted to residential. And so we've seen over 20 million square feet of our office space being converted to residential, which is going to make this supply challenge even more of an issue. And let me give you an example of a 21st century problem that's crying out for a 21st century solution. That's affordable housing. We discussed that New York is a winner in terms of attracting more and more residents, but because of that, it's made housing more and more expensive. And neighborhoods in the city that once were not necessarily appealing have become appealing and have opened up to prime neighborhoods as we've gone forward. And the good news about that is that they have grown as neighborhoods. They've also have texture and character and diversity that's been attractive to the lifestyle of many of the young millennials and professionals that are coming here. So it's been a very successful process, and we've seen that obviously in Long Island City, we've seen that in Williamsburg, we've seen that in Park Slope. But the problem is these affordable alternatives are quickly not becoming affordable, because as we've got this influx of population growth and people are moving to these neighborhoods, the cost of living there continues to rise. We need to come up with different solutions, and I think we need to think about a broader scope. As the mayor talks about his ambitious goal of building 200,000 units of affordable housing, it's a good plan, but it's one that we're not going to get done using 20th century solutions. And while things like 421A programs will help, it's not going to help enough to create the type of product that we need when we have a population that's growing as fast as we're growing. So we need to broaden the lens. And one good metric here to highlight what we can do on that front is looking at the density of New York versus the region as a whole. So if you think about New York City, there's 27,000 people per square mile. If you broaden that lens and think about the region, including New York City, we're 2,800 people per square mile. So that is tremendous, much more capacity that we can grow ourselves into, yet we're confining ourselves to thinking about New York City as where we need to find solutions. And that's not going to work. We got to get beyond New York City, and we got to think regionally to solve our affordable housing problem. And there's been examples of where this has worked, right? We've seen downtown White Plains, Jersey City, and Hoboken be areas that people are attracted to. And the trick and why they've been successful is they have a quality of life that appeals to the young professional. They have public transportation. They have more of an urban type setting. They have retail, restaurants, and a quality of life that people want to have. Assets of these downtowns is that most of these downtowns have public transportation that go right into them. And they have excess capacity in that public transportation. And they have rail. They have, they have character. They have diversity. They have that, walkable downtown. We're working here in Glen Cove on the left-hand side at Garvey's Point, and we're working a public-private partnership with the city, and we're going to redevelop at RXR 1,000-unit housing development there, mixed use. It will have a ferry that will leave there and come directly to the city, a 40-minute ferry ride. It's got 3 Long Island Railroad stations within a 10 minutes from the site. And then it's walking distance from a historic downtown of Glen Cove. Similarly, we're developing in Yonkers, right up from the train station, a 400-unit new development you could see there. You can walk right down to the train station through the city, and you can be at Grand Central in 30 minutes. We've also been named master developer in New Rochelle, where we're actually working with them on redeveloping their downtown to make it appealing for these types of users. And we're doing the same thing in Hempstead. We're doing the same thing in Huntington Station as well right now. And what's important here is these downtowns have been economically suffering. They've realized that they can't attract the young people because the product they have isn't appealing to them. And they're actually losing their aging population because the product that they have isn't appealing to them either. So this is a situation where it's a win-win-win And by the way, I will give the mayor's office credit because recently they've been talking about thinking more regionally. You need to think about what makes us attractive to connect to New York City, which means infrastructure, ferry service, ways to make it easier for people to want to locate there so our workforces can go there and come back to New York. Another way to think about our office space challenges as we go forward in terms of 21st century office space is to think about utilizing 20th century iconic buildings and repurposing them into 21st century uses. So here's 230 Park, a building we acquired last week. It's adjacent to Grand Central, iconic, great architecture. We plan on investing $100 million into this building to give it a 21st century modern office building feel. Similarly, 75 Rockefeller Plaza, we're in the process right now of taking this iconic landmark building, and we've gutted the entire interior of it and are rebuilding a 21st century state-of-the-art office building in this building, new lobbies, new elevators, energy efficiencies. It's going to feel like any brand new building. Let's talk about another 21st century problem that we have to address, and perhaps the most important, which is the aging of our infrastructure. It's no secret that our infrastructure is old. As far as I'm concerned, we've been living on borrowed time. We're recycling last century's infrastructure to take us through the next century, and it's not going to work. Bridges, they average 63 years old. Now, again, we're talking averages, so that means that some are much older than 63 years old. Water mains, 69 years old. Sewer mains average 84 years old. So when you wonder why we hear things failing, you can understand why you hear things failing, right? LaGuardia Airport, which, by the way, is we've all heard, right, was Joe Biden called it the third world airport. It's still third up on this chart, so it's not even the worst of, right? We're still early in that game here as to what it is. So it's a problem, and we need to invest a lot of money just to maintain what we have. Forget about building the future capacity that we need for that increased population that's out there. Right now, we've surpassed 20 million people in the New York region, which is the most population of any region in the United States. And we haven't, have the capacity to do it. We have to even salvage what we have. If you look at the MTA's budget, right, it's $30 billion capital budget, 77% of it is just to repair or upgrade its existing system. Not about expansion, not about new programs. That's a challenge. And that's a challenge that we have to think about new ways to address, right? We can't, the old tools aren't going to do it anymore. And we've seen some approaches here, and I'm going to review a few of them, right? Public-private partnerships. A great example is the Tappan Zee Bridge, and I think, when the governor spoke to ABNY a couple of weeks ago, he talked about that public-private partnership to not only provide financing and also some federal financing, but the public-private partnership does something else that's very, very important. It transfers risk, and it gives us the benefit of private sector innovation. And I'm a big believer in it. We're doing it at the port with the Goethals Bridge right now. We're doing a public-private partnership with both federal money and the private sector, and it's going extraordinarily well along the way. Innovative financing. We've heard about Sam Schwartz's congestion pricing and Move New York. I think we have to think about things like that. I think we have to think about ways to minimize congestion, not only to raise money, but with things like congestion pricing, you're also shifting behaviors. So we're in situations where we can find ways to reduce the congestion in our city and incent people to be a part of the solution versus part of the problem. We have a lot of real estate here. We got to think about taking the demand for that, the value that's created, and transferring it into real estate. Again, another last good example was One Vanderbilt with the city and S.L. Green putting money, $250 million, into the subway system. The Port Authority, frankly, was really established to be an agency that was insulated from those political ties and actually was in the parochial regional aspects to think long-term. Over the years, right, politics infused the Port Authority. It created a state of dysfunctionality, and some of that, the attributes that we saw turned to the opposite. And, we had that horrific, incredulous situation with the George Washington Bridge. And, very disappointing and an insult, frankly, to our region and an insult, frankly, to the 7,000 men and women that work hard every day at the Port Authority to have someone do something like that and be so abusive along the way. And something that, personally, I feel terrible about, and I know the whole agency feels terrible that it's marred its reputation. But there was one thing good that came out of that. And the one thing good that came out of that was it was a point where everyone said enough is enough. We need to make dramatic changes to the Port Authority so we can make it effective for this region again. And the governors actually formed a panel, a special panel, where they actually put 3 people from New York, 3 people from New Jersey. I participated. My counterpart, John Degnan, who's chairman of the Port Authority, participated. And then people from the governor's office participated. And they said, take a blank piece of paper and figure out what to do. Here's some of the changes I think are important noting. There used to be an executive director and a chairman. And the New York governor appointed the executive director, and the New Jersey governor appointed the chairman. And what you had was these were political appointees that each looked out for the parochial interest of each of their states. So within the Port Authority, both at the board level and sleeping down to the staff level, you basically had 2 different agendas, a New Jersey agenda and a New York agenda. And that was a major challenge along the way. So the changes that we've made is that we're actually bringing in a CEO that has no political affiliation. We're actually right now doing a national search through a well-known search firm, and we're going to try to find the best non-political CEO to run the Port Authority that will hopefully be immune to any of the regional politics. We've also restructured the governance, where now, rather than having a chairman and a vice chairman, we have a rotating chair. One from the New York rotates first for 2 years, then New Jersey, and an office of the chairman, where the chairman and the vice chairman and the CEO come together on a regular basis and figure out what do we need to do as fiduciaries for the port, fiduciaries for this region, to make sure that we are able to move things forward and effectively. We refocused the mission of the port to 21st century transportation infrastructure. We had mission drift. We went into certain businesses, real estate, other things that we shouldn't have been doing. And the goal here was, let's refocus on what's important, what the mission of the port was initially. So we're focusing on our ports, raising money and raising the Bayonne Bridge so that we're ready for the expansion of that business. Our airports, and as everyone knows, Governor Cuomo has put forth a design competition, master planning for all of our airports that we're going to be rebuilding. And we have $8 billion in our $28 billion capital budget to be invested in our airports. And one of the first to come up is the Central Terminal building and the rebuilding of a new LaGuardia airport. And then we have this Trans-Hudson transportation. And this is a critical area, which I'm not sure a lot of people focus on, the issues surrounding Hudson transportation. The amount of people that cross the Hudson every day to commute to New York and work in New York, and the challenges that those people face. The bus terminal in New York, as you know, was built in 1950s, and at the time it was built, America's favorite bus driver was Ralph Cramden. And at the time it had 130,000 people a day would use that bus terminal. Today we have 230,000 people using the same bus terminal. And so, and as we look at going forward, by 2040, we expect ridership to grow to 330,000 people per day. Now, to put that in perspective, that would mean we need 1,000 27-ton buses to come through the Lincoln Tunnel into the bus terminal every day. Now, earlier this year, we had a presentation by staff on some solutions to a new bus terminal. And as far as I'm concerned, we had a 20th century solution to a 21st century problem, which was, let's build a new bus terminal, albeit a bigger bus terminal, in Manhattan on 3.5 blocks of prime real estate, and that would be able to handle this 330,000 amount of buses that come through. What didn't address is those 330,000 buses still need to go through the same Lincoln Tunnel tubes, still need to go through our New York City streets, and is going to have all this congestion. So to me, it was like trying to put 10 pounds of bologna in a 5-pound bag. It doesn't work. And it's not going to be a solution that we can rely on long term. So let's talk about a 21st century solution to a 21st century problem. And it's got to be holistic, right? This isn't just about a bus terminal. It's about the whole Trans-Hudson challenge. And there's more than, and opportunities for that matter. So on the bus terminal, why don't we take a step back and say, why don't we move it to New Jersey? Why don't we build a bus terminal or 2 bus terminals in New Jersey? Let's see if we can find a way to link it to rail so that people get off the bus, jump on rail under our New York City subway system or our PATH system or into Penn Station. Let's think about if we can leverage ferry service, so when they're dropped off in the terminus, they could jump on ferries to get into New York. I mean, you go to places like Sydney, Australia, or Hong Kong in the morning, you look out the window, it feels like you're being attacked by ferries that are approaching it. We're definitely underutilizing that opportunities. Sell off our 3.5 acres of prime New York real estate without the encumbrances of bus terminals on them, and reinvest that money into the bus terminals, and frankly, to deal with another issue, which is the gateway tunnels, which I don't know how many people are familiar, but we have 2 tubes of transit coming from Hudson into Penn Station that are over 100 years old, and according to Amtrak, are going to be having to take offline at least one of them in the very near future. But to me, it sounds smarter than just building the same type of bus terminal, just bigger, on 3.5 blocks in prime Manhattan real estate. I'm very bullish on New York. And while I've given you some problems, as I said, I think we're in an incredible time here. But I think we need to be cautious. And I think, Bill Gates said it well when he said, success is a lousy teacher. It seduces smart people to believe they can't lose. And so while we're at this golden age, we're not at a spot right now where we can afford to get complacent as we go forward, right? I mean, it wasn't long ago, in 1990, that in Time magazine, the cover was a picture of the rotting apple. And the polls in that magazine were 75% of the people view New York City as a dangerous place to live, and 60% would rather move away than remain in New York City. And that was because of public safety, infrastructure, all things we talked about before. So we have to not get complacent. We have to use where we are as a region, the strength that we have today as a region, to go out and address the problems proactively, not wait for that tunnel crossing the Hudson to crash or some other problems like that to occur, or bridges to fall, because that's not going to that's going to immediately set our economy back. And I'm confident we can do it because New Yorkers have been faced with challenges before, and we always rise to the occasion. Obviously, Superstorm Sandy. Right here, we're hit with this enormous storm. Down at the Trade Center, we had 150 million gallons of water just in the Trade Center site alone. After it happened, people were talking about, will Lower Manhattan and the waterfront properties around New York ever be viable again? Will people be interested in working there, living there, buying them? And here we are 1.5 years or 2 years later, and we're going to do it. But how are we going to do it? Who was going to pay for it? When was it going to get done? Who was going to be the architect? What was going to look like? Were all questions that people were raising. And there was as I said, a lot of conflict through that process. But if you go down today to downtown and the World Trade Center site, it's alive, it's reborn. We talked to Joe Daniels this year. Even the 9/11 Memorial has had over 20 million people visit since it's opened. In 1 year, the museums had about 2 million people come visit there. One World Trade Center, which we opened just recently, this past fall, people were saying, who would go to that building? Oh, is it a Target? Is this? Guess what? It's 70% leased. And Connie Nast, the publisher of Vogue magazine, is in that building. And it's alive and vibrant every day. And it's a beautiful building to work. And we're seeing that with all the other buildings there. Retailers are opening up there. Later on this year, the fences are going to come down, and it's going to be a brand new World Trade Center, vibrant central business district from people around the world want to live and work. And if we can do that, right, if we can all, which is we, all can do that, I'm confident that we can overcome the challenges that we face ahead. So thank you.